Hey everyone! So Wizards of the Coast released a new Unearthed Arcana, and I'm going to review it. The link to this document will be in the description if you want to see it. It's playtest material, so they're looking for feedback before they make this a real thing. For now, I'll be looking at the Barbarian archetype, Path of the Wild Soul. In case this video is too long, my opinion is it's a great idea, but it's going to need a lot more refining before it's ready to become an actual archetype. Now, instead of analyzing this in order of when you get the abilities, I'm going to analyze this in groups of abilities that fit together with each other. It will be easier to understand the context of each ability if I review those that work together at the same time. First, let's do flavor themes. While there's a few means of becoming a wild magic sorcerer, the claim here is that the powerful emotions of the Feywild manifest these strange effects, making your rage more of a roar of freedom than a form of anger. With this, you get lingering magic. At 3rd level, you can cast detect magic a number of times equal to your constitution modifier per long rest. You also look more magical while doing this, faintly glowing different colors depending on the magic detected. I like the concept of this, but its example of how you came to be is limiting, and the ability is very minor. When looking at the wild magic sorcerer, you have options of where it came from. Perhaps it's from Limbo, or the Elemental Planes, or the Far Realm. It could be granted by Fey, Demon, or just pure luck. Why can't the Wild Soul have just as diverse a means of taking the path? Why must it be connected just to the realm of the Feywild? I get that in the game, you can change the flavor however you want. But with the Wild Sorcerer having more options, why did they limit it with this one? Now for lingering magic. There's 2 problems with this effect. First, detect magic is not only a 1st level spell, but also a ritual. Give the wizard a little time, and he could do this himself, at will. Second, you get no benefits for being able to do this innately, meaning the wizard always does it better. No proficiency in Arcana, no advantage on understanding the magic, or bonus based on your constitution modifier. You basically just point it out, and then wait for someone smarter to tell you what it is. I would recommend making this ability at will, so if you're pointing it out, you can at least do so constantly. If not at will, that should give something to help you identify the magic. Perhaps it also gives you proficiency at Arcana, and gives advantage on checks to identify the detected magic. Or maybe it's a passive ability with proficiency at Arcana, and allows the player to use Constitution instead of Intelligence for the skill as you feel the effects around you. Along with lingering magic, you also get Wild Surge. Starting at 3rd level, whenever you enter your rage, you roll on this table and cause the effect on the table. There's 8 options, and you use your Constitution modifier to decide the save DCs of any effects. I'll note now that 14th level, you get Chaotic Fury, which allows you to re-roll on this table as a bonus action, getting the new effect. I do like how, unlike the Sorcerer archetype, where you sometimes have wild magic, with this, you always have wild magic. This is replacing the bonus effect you get when raging, so it should be comparable with other bonus effects for raging. Which is my problem with this. When raging at 3rd level, the effect you get is constant throughout the rage, as it defines how your rage is different. And yet, some of these effects only last through the turn that you use them, which is unfortunate. I'll note now that I'm biased against effects, which have abilities that don't last the entire rage, and that if we change all of these to long-term effects, the 14th level ability should be changed to having 2 effects at once, instead of rolling to change the effect constantly. That's the idea I would go for. With that being said, let's go through the list and my opinions on them. 1. Each creature within 30 feet of you takes 1d10 necrotic damage, and you gain temporary hit points based on the total damage dealt. I'd like to note that this is a 30-foot radius, not a 10-foot radius or anything like that. This is more area than a fireball, and since you can't choose targets, it's likely to hit all allies and all enemies. So let's say you roll a 5, hit 3 party members, add 3 bad guys. You just transferred 15 HP from the rest of the party to the tank, and stole 15 HP from the enemies. If you land on this at level 3, you may end up gaining more temporary hit points than you have hit points, which is kind of absurd. Also, there's no time limit, so these hit points will stay until they're lost or you take a long rest. I do like how this effect can be good or bad depending on the situation with enemies and allies, but not that it can be good or bad just because rolling a 1 on the dice barely does anything. It probably needs some damage scaling with the levels, as well as the ability for people to make a saving throw against the effect. But of the one-time effects on this table, this is the one I'm most okay with, since it changes the battlefield every time it occurs. Second option. You teleport up to 20 feet, and can do so as a bonus action for the rest of the rage. I love this effect, because there's so much you can do with it, but it's not obvious. In fights against big scary enemies, you can use this to maneuver the combat's terrain to your advantage, and against a skirmish of smaller enemies, you can always pick the target you want in the fight. At the same time, it's not an easy ability to use, and trying to make it worthwhile is something a player will have to learn on the fly, which is why I like this ability. Option 3. You create a few spirits, which move randomly and then explode for some damage on a failed save. This is the option that I think needs the most work. First, there's way too much rolling. First, you roll a 3 on a d8, then you roll a d4 for the number of spirits. Then, for each spirit, you roll another d8 for a random direction. And finally, if this puts anyone in their area, you roll 2 d8s for damage. It's a lot of dice, consideration, and navigation for effect that happens an eighth of the time. Also, I'm pretty sure in most scenarios, this effect will do little to nothing. They all must be placed within a 30-foot area, but then you have to roll the right number for them to randomly find the right target to explode onto. And then the target may just make a save and have to do nothing. They only have a 5-foot radius, yet wander 30 feet away from their starting point. There's so much rolling, stalling the game to a standstill, and may lead to little or no result. I would honestly just throw this out. Ignoring the fact that it only happens once, and therefore isn't an enduring effect, it slows down the game greatly as everything gets calculated. Number 4. For the rest of the rage, you get a +2 to your AC, and creatures within 10 feet of you take damage equal to your Constitution modifier whenever they hit you. This seems like an option you'd always want to roll. Nothing seems particularly broken, but it's always strong as both a damage-focused barbarian or a tank-focused barbarian. While there may be some number tweaks, this seems good as is. Option 5. For the rest of the rage, a circle 10 feet around you is difficult terrain. It should state that you're not affected yourself, but I'm sure that's just an oversight. This one makes it so people within your range are going to stay within your range. I'd prefer if the circle was 15 feet, just to make sure it holds down the enemy, and even cause problems for enemies running around you to your allies. But it's fine as is, though a bit weak. Option 6. Until your next turn, creatures that fail a wisdom save have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. So if they succeed, this effect does nothing. And if they fail, but attack someone else or cause you to make a saving throw, this effect does nothing. Again, I don't like effects that last one round, but this one is also flawed if you're not their target. It needs to be stronger, but I'd say it's just better being replaced by another more constant effect. Maybe you could use your bonus action to make one creature make another save against this effect? I don't know. Number 7. For the rest of the rage, one of your weapons deals psychic damage, has the light property, and can be thrown like a dagger, coming back to you at the end of the turn. I like how this is so clearly based off the Shadow Blade spell. But if we want the Shadow Blade to work with barbarians, then we would need our rage damage and reckless attack to work with thrown weapons, instead of just melee attacks. Also, it'd be nice if we could throw the weapon twice with extra attack, instead of just coming back at the end of turn. It's a good idea, but I feel combining the idea with the barbarian's abilities wasn't completely thought through. It needs some powering up, some connection between the two. And finally, option 8. You shoot a 5-foot wide, 60-foot long line, and people in the line must make a Constitution save or take some damage and be blinded until your next turn. Like a previous effect, if they make their saves, this does nothing. Unlike the previous effect, blinding an enemy is often very powerful. A full turn of your party wailing on a character can just devastate the enemy quite quickly, especially since you're going into rage as this happens. It's strong, and I could see this option staying around, but again, I prefer more passive effect. So that's the options. Since I said some of them should be replaced, I should give examples of replacements. Since some of the ones I really liked seem to be based off of certain spells, like number 7 being Shadowblade and number 2 being Misty Step, what if we continued that trend? For a more aggressive damage dealing effect, we can base it off of Flaming Spear, rolling a ball of energy around as you guard their way away from the sphere with your raging body. For protective options, how about a form of enchantment that forces the enemies to target you instead of allies? Maybe there can be versatile effects from using Alter Self or Darkness or Silence or other spells of that kind. Overall, I do like the variety of this ability, and that always happens instead of just sometimes. We just need to work on the variety itself. Next, I'm going to address Arcane Rebuke. At 10th level, when a creature forces you to make a saving throw while raging, you can use your reaction to deal 3d6 force damage to them. So this ability actually ties in pretty well with the flavor, while covering the barbarian's weakness to wisdom saves. Instead of trying to cancel the effect, like the Berserker or Zealot barbarian would do, you allow the effect to occur, but more chaos ensues as damage is thrown at the person causing it. You don't weaken their effect, you make more chaotic effects and punish them, without preventing them from doing it. If this stays as is, then it's perfectly fine. But I do have 2 suggestions. First, we should note how this interacts with spells that require concentration. If, like Hold Person, the spell forces the player to make a save when cast, could the damage from the Arcane Rebuke break their concentration? I think so, but it's not clear. Perhaps this would just be a sage advice thing that they add later, but some clarity would be helpful. Second, when you compare this to the Berserker's Mindless Rage or the Zealot's Fanatical Focus, both 2 abilities that help defend against their weakness to saving throws, you'll notice that those abilities come in at level 6 instead of level 10. I would recommend switching this to a 6th level ability, starting with 2d6s of damage and scaling in the same way as the Ancestral Guardian's Spirit Shield. As for the 6th level ability they currently have, well, it's going to need some work. If there's any ability in this class that I think is open to just being pulled out of the archetype entirely, it's this one. Magic Reserves. At 6th level, you can use an action, touch a creature, and roll a d4. That creature recovers a spell slot of a level equal to the number rolled, or if they don't have a spell slot of that level, they gain temporary hit points equal to 5 times the number rolled. At 14th level, you replace the d4 with a d6. The consequence of doing this is you take force damage equal to 5 times the number rolled. So let's go through everything wrong with this ability. First, it does nothing for you. If you use it on yourself, you gain temporary hit points equal to the damage it takes. It's fine that this doesn't buff you up, but the fact that this is the only ability you get at 6th level and gives options to others instead of yourself is a bit lame. Second is the lack of limits on this ability. You might notice that the only limit on how many times you can use this ability is how much damage you can take. Also, you may notice that it gives spell slots, which a lot of characters can turn into healing. Now, the healing can be quite variant with the dice rolled, but assuming a bard with a charisma score of 18 is in your party, casting just Cure Wounds with the spell slot you're given heals an average of 20 health back for the 4th level spell slots, and a minimum of 5 health back for the 1st level spell slots. So you'll be gaining more health than you lose on average. Even if you fall unconscious from damage, any healing whatsoever will pull you right back up. So a ranger or druid with Goodberry can allow you to loop this effect for infinite spells for party members, as long as you're willing to go low on health. Also, this assumes these are the only healing spells you're using. A cleric's Beacon of Hope will maximize all healing dice rolled, or a paladin's Aura of Vitality or druid's Healing Spirit will easily bring you back to full health and beyond. While it's okay to have cool synergies between classes, this combo is free spells and healing for the entire party, with the only prerequisite being that someone in your party can heal. Bards, clerics, druids, even rangers and paladins are all capable of breaking this ability wide open, not by focusing on this combo, but by taking one spell for their spell list. Even if these limiters weren't a problem, the power of this ability is absurd. To trade 15 health on your tank for an additional fireball in the next fight is insane. At 14th level, it is the only ability that will give you an additional spell slot above 5th level. There's a reason that sorcery points and arcane recovery aren't allowed to do that. There's a major distinction between spells of 5th level and lower, and 6th and higher. The 6th level spell Heal will just give the player 70 hit points and remove all diseases, costing the barbarian only 30 hit points himself. While I could talk about ways to fix this ability, it's probably just best to create a new ability for this class. Even if we limit the times used to your constitution modifier or something, most players would probably prefer just gaining something themselves instead of being a battery for the other players. Maybe there's a table of spells and you could randomly cast one yourself, or maybe we just have a new ability that ties in with Wild Surge. All I know is, as long as this ability is here, this archetype isn't going to work. So, as my final judgment, I do love the idea that this archetype is giving, but more work into the mechanics must be done before it's ready to leave playtest. Just from an options perspective, the Barbarian has needed some more variety over just, this archetype helps me hurt things more, and this archetype helps me take more hits. Which, while there's many cool ways to do this, it will get tedious fast, since Barbarian's abilities limit the class to just melee strength attacks. This is a great way to spread out to another option without losing the core nature that is the Barbarian. This archetype is not ready to see print yet, but I do hope to see either a new version of this later or in the near future. With that, I think I said everything I wanted to about this archetype, and I'll make a video on the Monk archetype later. Until then, have a great day, everyone.